When I first heard about BioWare making another Mass Effect game, I wasn't surprised it would interest me due to how the previous games were received, in addition of my interest in science fiction. While Casey Hudson, the former game director, was no longer working for the Canadian studio, it was interesting what direction they would take without compromising the series' reputation. Now it's been 5 years since Shepard's conclusion. Is BioWare's next episode worth your time?
Is anyone ready for something this big?
Set 600 years after the events of Mass Effect 3, you take control of either Scott or Sarah Ryder. Being part of the Andromeda initiative, your party has awoken from cryosleep in order to find a new home for humanity in the Helios cluster. However, when a routine mission on Habitat 7 goes wrong, Alec Ryder, the father and Pathfinder, sacrifices himself to save Scott or Sarah, and it's up to you as the new Pathfinder to find a habitable home. If I had to summarise the story in one sentence, I don't think it's nowhere near as compelling compared to the original trilogy. To begin with, how Ryder becomes Pathfinder is caused by an idiotic oversight, as Alec takes off his helmet as a sacrifice, despite the fact he could have shared his life support to keep both parties alive. It also isn't helped how shallow Ryder is. While there are logs which flesh out the backstory of the Ryder family in the form of memory triggers, but due to how they've been implemented as collectibles instead of being an integral part of the plot, it makes them feel too distant. Another area where the story falters is the crew that assist you, as they are less defined and not as memorable. There are exceptions like Suvi, a scientist with a religious background, and Yal, who sees anyone but his own race as alien. I don't mind the introduction of new characters to expand the lore, but what I do mind is how they are written. There are loyalty missions to complete and romance options to pursue, but they don't come to the level of those in Mass Effect 2. The idea of exploring a new galaxy seems to be a promising prospect from a narrative perspective, but Mass Effect Andromeda doesn't take advantage of this. This is because there are only 2 races, excluding wildlife, which Ryder interacts with. Both are bipedal species and somehow speak English, despite their cultural background. As such, it could have potentially subverted the cliché of having multiple races able to comprehend each other, regardless of the points I've listed. One of those races, the Ket, which are the main antagonists, are one-dimensional compared to the Reapers from the previous games. In the original trilogy, the Reapers harvest advanced civilizations to prevent those preying on the younger species, while preserving their existence, as it was the only solution before Shepard's intervention. Although their motives remained secret until Mass Effect 3, the logic behind their motives made you think on who was order and who was chaos. But in Mass Effect Andromeda, the Ket just want to turn every individual to their cause without reason, which is like them saying, screw the galaxy. While the story is weaker compared to its predecessors, I would be lying to you if there weren't some bright spots. I do like how it explores the potential issues of space exploration, like how planets could potentially support life only to realise they can't be colonised, the struggle of micromanaging your resources, and the fact you've awoken from cryosleep to uncover that all the people you knew back home are deceased. There was one point where I was dealing with protesters who wanted to reunite with their families who were still in stasis, but I made the tough decision not to release them in order to manage resources. Since you're an explorer, your main objective is to find and colonize planets that can support life, which can be done by accessing remnant vaults, clearing out enemies, and many other side missions to boost the planet's viability. As a result, this will level up your initiative's rank, allowing you to access perks that can help Ryder in the field. Likewise, combat, tech and biotic abilities can be leveled up, but unlike its predecessors, you not only have more options to choose from, but they can also be switched out according to the situation. Plus, Ryder isn't locked to a certain class as it can be altered in the pause menu. While the variety is a nice bonus, I did find the interface overwhelming due to the many combinations that can be utilised, and as such I ended up playing the game as a conventional shooter initially. However, once I reached the halfway point in the main story, I started to appreciate the RPG elements as it made the combat more engaging. Add to the fact Ryder is equipped with a jetpack, it provided a sense of verticality to each firefight. Also, the cover system has been reworked to complement the fast-paced action, as you'll snap to cover rather than pressing a button. Personally, I think this is a good change due to how frantic each engagement can get. The only thing that brings down the combat is how limited your squad mates function. While they can be ordered to take positions and are capable in a firefight, I felt they were trivial to my goal. Mass Effect Andromeda also has a crafting system to develop armor, weapons and augmentations, and this is done by scanning for technology as well as mining minerals. However, just like applying skill points, this can be a daunting affair, as the interface for this feature isn't user friendly due to the options you have and the resources each blueprint requires. Luckily, you can buy your equipment from merchants, assuming that you've got the credits to do so. As for content, there's more than 40 hours of gameplay on offer, including the story missions, side objectives and the multiplayer, which I'll talk about later. Some objectives I did find enjoyable, and they were a change of pace compared to the story, even if they boiled down to fetch quests and going to locations to carry out a task. Going back to the exploration, Ryder has access to a 6-wheel drive vehicle called the Nomad, allowing for traversing environments as well as mining for resources. It can be upgraded, but in my experience it didn't seem like it needed attention due to its default effectiveness, plus it can't be used in direct combat as it's unarmed. But to its credit, it handles significantly better compared to the Mako in the original Mass Effect. Conversations in Mass Effect Andromeda have been altered for professional, casual, logical and emotional responses instead of the Paragon and Renegade dialogue. This was done to make interactions less black and white, and there were a few of the situations that made me think long after I made the decision, but I don't think it works due to Ryder's lack of influence. Dragon Age Inquisition, another BioWare game, also had similar mechanics where it wasn't all black and white, but it worked because your actions didn't just affect you, it also affected the relationships with your companions, as they all had their own political opinions. Case in point, it didn't feel like the character I wanted to play as, at least from a narrative perspective, not to mention the dialogue at times can come off both stilted and juvenile.
I think I really pissed that one off. Maybe because I shot him in the face.
You're a mystery. I've been studying those glyphs for months, and then you arrive and poof, solved.
Alec is dead.
Mass Effect Andromeda also brings back the cooperative multiplayer where you must survive multiple waves of enemies, with specific objectives sprinkled throughout. There are multiple characters to choose from, but unlike the single player, the multiplayer has perks associated for each class, which makes it less daunting for our abilities to invest in. Credits are also awarded to access new crates for new weapons, consumables as well as new characters. While I enjoyed the cooperative experience, it's disappointing BioWare didn't implement any form of competitive multiplayer, although adding competitive game modes would open up another can of worms as far as balance is concerned, since weapons, powers and even the environments would have to be taken into account. When the game was released in March, a lot of the criticism was pointed towards the awkward animations, and while BioWare has come out with 2 patches in order to address this issue and much more, it doesn't mean I'm going to give them and any other developer a free pass who think it's okay to release an unfinished product, as the last thing we want is to be conditioned to this mentality, with studios using this as an excuse to sell their games. During my playthrough, I encountered moments where the game would freeze, the characters would clip through solid matter, certain sound files were either out of sync or won't play completely, the frame rate got choppy at times, and there was even a side mission I couldn't complete due to the game crashing. The soundtrack, although suitable for this kind of game, isn't as memorable compared to the original trilogy, but on a positive note, the planets you go to not only look unique, but they do have a sense of scale to them. It's just a shame the immersion is tarnished by how poorly the game was optimised. Even though there were some aspects I liked about Mass Effect Andromeda, it's one of those games that had a solid foundation but wasn't fully realised, like how Ryder's character could have been written to show development from being rookie to Pathfinder, the fact you can't play as other races, the lack of competitive multiplayer and much more. With the series going into a hiatus due to its reception, as well as BioWare Montreal being converted into a support studio, it's uncertain whether we'll see another Mass Effect title. Is it the worst game ever made? No. Is it the weakest entry in the series? I say yes.
Taking her up. Where to next, Pathfinder?